Welcome to Church Planting in a Pandemic, the story of Hope City, Florida. We're your co-hosts, Chandan Bangar and Eric Smith. Well, welcome back to Church Planting in a Pandemic. This is episode 2 of season 1. I want to encourage you to go back and listen to episode 1 if you haven't yet, where we kind of set up our goal and our reasoning behind the podcast to help you, be equipped and be sent out and maybe plant a church or something like that. But we're going to jump into episode 2, and we're going to kind of talk about the beginnings of Hope City Church, the struggles, the real struggles out there. I know many of you are like, man, this sounds really polished. Well, in reality, church planting is not polished at all. Even when I wasn't here yet, you went through a lot of struggles to kind of even figure out location, timing. I know you mentioned in the last episode, you're like, man, we couldn't meet on Sundays anywhere. We had to meet, in a realtor's building on a Saturday. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. My name's Eric Smith, and this is Chandan, and we're so excited about this podcast and to share a little bit of our story, and hopefully it encourages you and helps you on your journey. We moved here December 19th of 2020. Jumped off the ledge to move here to plant a church. Knew a handful of people, but had no idea, even if for sure how many of those were going to be with us. But we felt like, okay, we've got a few friends here that I think are going to help us on the journey and be a part of this. But just the only thing we really had was the call of God. And the Lord just went ahead of us in such a powerful and amazing way by laying so much groundwork for us. Financially, we were able to really build a strong base of giving prior to even moving here, and so that was really cool. That was through individual donors, other churches, so many incredible things and sacrificial gifts that people gave. It's just a blessing from God, and when you're on this side of it, you'll never forget that. You'll never forget those moments where God worked a miracle, and I'm so grateful for all those people who trusted God and entrusted us with their gifts and their resources to give us the opportunity to do this. It's extremely humbling. It's an honor, and I'm really grateful. And so we were able to do that, which just so thankful to God for that. And we made the move here, and once we got on the ground, it was Christmas week, so we didn't do a whole lot. We just hung out and tried to put together the best Christmas we could with the pandemic and with everything, because it was still pretty much locked down December 2020. Now, Florida, Southwest Florida, was a little more open than other places, but still there was a lot of restrictions and challenges that you were facing anywhere you went. And so January hit, and we met in a home a couple times right at the end of the year and beginning of January, right when we got here. And we started with about 15 people. Mm-hmm. And so I was excited about it because the 15 people in the room I felt really good about. But it was pretty scary, too, at the same time thinking, oh, wow, God, I pray that you will take this and just multiply this and do something really amazing. And, of course, that's exactly what the Lord did and has done and continues to do to this day, which is a beautiful thing. But I told the team, the small group that we're meeting with, I said, listen, we're going to start meeting on the weekends, because part of my philosophy of church planting, everybody's got different views and opinions and philosophies, but mine being a former church planter and helping, I don't even know how many people I've helped plant or coach, but it's a good bit. I felt like this was the same strategy we were going to use that I'd used in the past, and that is to get your launch team, your core group, whatever you want to call it, to begin meeting on the weekend, because you want them to give that time and that space to you. This is just an opinion. You don't want to be meeting on Thursday and then they're all still going to other churches if they were originally a part of a church, but they feel called to help you plant the church. I like to challenge people to make the leap, jump in. Let's go. We're going in. Be all in with us. So we began that journey, and the challenge was, because of the pandemic, literally could not find a place to meet. I looked, this is no exaggeration, January and February, I spent every day of my life during the week looking for a place to meet. I literally knocked on the door of every church that I could see or find anywhere here. And I don't say this in a disparaging way to the churches for not allowing us to meet, but because of the pandemic, everybody's church board, everybody's pastoral team, whoever was in charge, most of them had made the decision that, man, we're barely having services. The last thing we can do is open up our building and let your kids into our kids space and people into our auditorium or sanctuary, whatever. And so I understood that, but we were running into every barrier. I mean, I met with so many different people, secular spaces, movie theaters, rental spaces, name it, schools, couldn't find anywhere to meet.
Wow.
It was very discouraging.
I can imagine.
And so we had 15 people. We had strong giving, so that was encouraging. We had an amazing group of a small group of people, but I was so discouraged in thinking, God, why aren't you opening this door? Like, what's going to happen here? If I can't get this group of people together, this is just not going to happen.
Right.
And we've relocated, and all the fear that sets in, and the paranoia and the anxiety, and so I'm trying to pray off that and deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so we found this. I met with a church planter that's down here. He's a great guy. His name's Jake Miller, and he planted a church, and they meet on Sunday mornings at this place. It's called the Naples Area Board of Realtor building. It's like a convention type building, seat about 110 people, maybe a few less or a few more. And so they rent their building out at different times, and they were actually open to renting it to us on Saturdays. So we had to start meeting on Saturdays, which I did not like at all. I felt like it was a very challenging time to build momentum, but we did it all the way from the last weekend of January 2021 until the week before Mother's Day 2021. And that's when we moved into a temporary space, our second space. But I'll talk about that at another time. But it was during that time that, man, it was just really tough because we couldn't find anywhere to meet on Sundays, and I felt like for us to build the momentum we needed to make the shift. But I'll tell you, our people were amazing. So we had our first gathering from the house of 15 to the last Saturday of January, and we jumped up to I think there were 42 or 38. I don't remember the amount of people that were there, but it was very encouraging because I made sure to space the chairs out as far as possible. We have to social distance, so everybody sits far apart. The place we were renting, of course, required us to wear masks at the time, and so that was the only bad part. You couldn't see who they really were. Everybody was covered up, but it was an amazing thing, and God just began to draw people to us. I can't even explain it. You know, I just want to give you some encouragement. If you're out there and you're pastoring a church, you're planting a church, you're leading anything, when God calls you, He always goes before you.
Yeah.
God always goes before you. And God is going to do things ahead of you to plant seeds in people's heart that have never even met you. They've never met you. They don't know you. But God's already working something in them. Just like when you told your story in the last episode about God was already working in y'all before I sent you that text. God's already working in people. So I don't have to live in this world of trying to make it happen. God's going to make it happen. My job is to be the faithful worker.
Yeah.
Right? So my job is to know that God is ahead of me. He's already working. And I believe that today, even though our church has seen this unusual explosion of growth, even for our next season, God's already working ahead of us. We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to worry. We just have to be faithful and work hard and be obedient. But anyway, so we saw God doing this, and so we saw going from that 42 to 38, and then it stayed around that. But new people would come in, and people would be in and out, in and out, in and out. But it was slow. But I even told our launch team at that time, I said, listen, you know, we just conceived this church, right? It's January 2021. This church has been conceived. So kind of the description of the birth of a child, because that's how I see a church plant. So conception has happened. The next 9 months, the baby will be in the womb, and we will prepare for birth. We will prepare for what church planters refer to as our grand opening, our launch. We call it a launch. And so that was going to be in the fall, in October. So we knew from January to October, these next 9 months are going to be the season of when the baby's in the womb. And so that is a critical season. And throughout this podcast, we're going to talk a lot about that. I think it'll give you some real nuts and bolts on ways that you can be effective during the process of launching a church, over the things that I've learned from a lot of different people over the years and from my own experience. But also, if you're pastoring an existing church, you can take these same principles because of COVID, every church is kind of at a new start, right?
Right.
Everybody's starting new. And just to encourage you, Pastor, if your church has seen a 70% decline, or you're only at 70% of your pre-COVID attendance, you almost have to erase that from your mind.
Yeah.
You have to know, where am I now, and I'm going to build from here, because you may never recover what was.
Right.
But what you can do is you can build from where you are. And so I think that's a much more encouraging position, because if you live in the past of trying to recover what was, it's going to be a defeating season for you. It's going to wear you out, and it's going to eat your soul alive. But anyway, sorry, just a little side note.
Well, it's like keep your hand on the plow, right?
Yeah, just keep plowing. But God goes before us, and we saw that. We saw that from a giving perspective. We saw that with people showing up. Because I told our people, I said, listen, we're in this, we just had conception. Don't invite people. Like, we are not ready for you to open the floodgates and tell people that to show up here, because we will totally drop the ball. We're not ready for that. We've got to lay the foundation. We've got to build the DNA and the culture of the church, because that's such a critical part of, I believe, of planting a church or starting anything, right? And so setting the right culture. And so we didn't really push inviting people at all. I never told people to invite people. I actually kind of warned them against it. When we had Easter, when you came the first time, we did a little bit of inviting, but it was still like limited. But what we saw during that time of going from 15 to 38 to 44, or as it slowly progressed until we saw Easter when you came, and from January until Easter was some date on April. I don't know when the date was, but I remember it being in April. We got up to, there were about 80 people. I don't remember the exact number that day when you came. And so we saw it progress, which that's pretty amazing growth, honestly,
right.
Especially because we were trying not to grow. I was trying to make sure that we were ready, had the foundation, had the volunteers trained, could minister and help a family that would show up with kids and all those factors. And so we had our team of people were just so amazing, because they were like, Eric, tell us what to do. We'll do it. I mean, they were just so incredible. And I'll never forget that group of people, because of their faithfulness and their willingness. We see the fruit today.
Yeah.
And it's just, praise God for that. It's amazing how God uses people. And they're such a blessing in my life, not only by helping start the church, but being friends and encouragers and supporters and just doing everything that has happened up to this point. But it was a wild journey of discouragement, not being able to find a place. And so that whole time we're meeting on Saturday, I'm doing everything I can every day to find a Sunday place. It never happened.
Right.
It never happened until we made the move off Bonita Beach Road to the temporary space that we met in from Mother's Day until we moved over here in September to our current building that we built out.
But before that, so because of the discouragement of not being able to find places, you had to literally change the times and locations constantly, right?
Yeah, because I said we had Saturday night. I kind of wasn't completely clear. Sometimes we had Saturday night. We met. There was one church that let us use their building one time on a Sunday night, but they told me you can only do this one time. And the next week I don't remember what was going on, but I had somebody coming in to help, and we couldn't use it then, so we had to go back to Saturday at the other place. But there was a week or two there where we weren't able to even meet because we had nowhere to meet. And the challenge was, by that point we had gotten to like 40-ish people.
Right.
And it would have been a little bit of a challenge to go back into a house. Maybe we could have done that, but
well, not with 80 on Easter, that's for sure.
No, not with 80 on Easter.
I even remember when I was here for that event or that service, you were texting me even like a couple of days before, like, still not sure if it's Saturday or Sunday. We'll figure it out. And then then we landed on Saturday night, and I was like, wow, okay. So it's just
Shandon's thinking, oh, what have I gotten myself into?
No,
Which the good thing is you had not made a commitment up to that point. So if it would have been really, really bad, you could have bailed.
Well, it's cool to see that the people were fluid and they were able to just say, hey, whenever you need us, wherever you need us.
Well, what was cool is we had one couple that was part of our team who had helped plant this amazing church in Missouri. But outside of them, nobody had ever been part of, no, there was another couple that had been part of a church plant years ago. But everybody was so cool because you're right. They were just so flexible and like, hey, whatever, let's do it. And that was God, right? Yeah. God put that in my heart and their heart to be flexible, to be willing to adjust. And so everybody was pivoting and moving, and we were having to change. Okay, we're meeting on Sunday night. We're meeting on Saturday night, but we never got to meet on a Sunday morning. I think, I take that back. I think there was 1 week maybe we did. I can't remember. We tried to anyway. It's kind of slipped my memory now if we ever were able to, but we ultimately did once we moved to where, the area we're in now, in Bonita Springs off Bonita Beach Road. Yeah. It was a wild ride, but it was a lot of ups and downs. In those moments, I was really like, the enemy whispers in my ear, like, God's not with you.
Wow.
What have you done? Like, you shouldn't have done this. And I knew that wasn't true. I knew the Lord was with me. And that's why I said in the last episode, you've got to have that call of God, because in those moments of immense discouragement, you know that the Lord is with you. And so, it was a wild ride, but man, we just saw God's faithfulness, and He was drawing people to us. And it wasn't just people, it was the right people.
Yeah.
And that's not to say everybody who showed up stuck and stayed around, but even the people that didn't, that may have just hung around with us for 2 or 3 weeks, it was amazing to see them, because even if it wasn't the right fit for them, who knows who they told and that came and now is part of what the Lord's doing here. And even if they went to another church, maybe it encouraged them and, got them fired up to go back to somewhere else and help.
Yeah, I just love that it's not, and not that anything's wrong with this. You didn't just like come take over a church. You came to a place you have never lived before, didn't know, connected with some people, and then they connected with some people, and it just multiplied from that. It was a small group essentially. Yeah. After it was you, then it was a small group, and then it built to 80 people on Easter, and then now fast forward to the temporary space. You want to talk a little bit about that and how we obtained that, which is really just like this empty garage lot kind of thing that turned into really a blessing for us, because we kept growing, so we had to keep building, and we got this temporary space. So talk about that.
Yeah, so the people who built out our building now, we're in it's pretty miraculous being a brand new church, that we're in a 15,200 square foot building that's brand new that just got built out. I mean, it's just God. He goes before you. If He's called you, He's going to do it. Now, you're going to run into literally 100 roadblocks, just like I did, before you find what it is you're supposed to do. But you got to keep pressing. You got to keep trusting. You got to keep going. You can't give up. That's part of faith, right? Faith is continuing to walk even when you run into something. It's continuing to press in. And so, we ended up finding the space that we're in now. And the developer that built this out said, hey, we're going to... I asked him, I said, listen, I'm in this situation where I'm meeting on Saturdays. It's portable. It's, it's not a very great setup for us. And I said, do you have anything else? And so they allowed us to use this 4,000 square foot, 2 big garage door warehouse thing. Yeah. Now, I will say it was pretty amazing because it was a new building, but it was just like concrete floors and concrete walls. It was, just... That was it.
It's supposed to be like in a little office space, a commercial office space.
Yeah, but it did have tall ceilings, and it was a pretty cool vibe. And I didn't hit on this. I want to say this because there may be those out there, and you hit on this a little bit in the last episode. But when we started the church, rather than me just going out and finding some random person who plays music in restaurants and saying, "Hey, can you come lead worship at my church?" And I would encourage everybody into this. I had a church that I had consulted with that had really dynamic, amazing worship. And so I asked them, because everybody was producing so much great online content during the pandemic, and they still are. And I said, hey, what do you think about me using you guys' worship team for my worship for my church plant? And so I played worship videos every week until you got here. Other than one week, we had a guest friend of mine who led worship one week in March, I believe. But other than that, the church had never had live worship until you showed up. We had videos, but they were done extremely well. And the thing that I loved about it was a live church leading worship. And so I would go into ProPresenter, which is a program you use, church software for services that I would do all my sermon slides. But I would go in and I would get their worship from whatever week. And I would even take other songs, and I would, I know a little bit about video editing. When you're a church planter, you learn a little bit about everything, okay? Absolutely. So I don't tell Chandon I know video editing because he may want me to edit a video, but I can do a little bit, nothing like him. I use the, basics. But I would edit songs that I felt like fit, and I would build worship sets. Yeah. And it was amazing, man. I was shocked because people were totally engaged. They were worshiping. We were using one speaker. Yeah. I mean, what is that speaker called? What is that?
Oh, I don't even remember. It's like an EV. It's basically like the Bose stand-up speakers.
Yeah, it's one of those stand-up speaker things that people do use for coffee houses. It sounds amazing, really. It's about a $1,500 setup. But we were using that, my computer, and I was running my own slides with a little clicker. Yeah. But, I mean, we had worship on the screen. And the reason why I bring that up is I'm really grateful that church let us do that, but there's tons of stuff online that you can get that nobody would care for you to use, or you can contact a church that you have respect for if you're planting a church, and I'm sure they would be cool to help you. But what was so amazing is it set the culture for the type of worship, because I knew we were looking for somebody like you. If you remember, I called you before I moved here months ago and tried to get you to come, and you told me no. Yeah. But, you finally gave in. But anyway, so it was, it was such a cool time because it wasn't about a person. It was just about worshiping God, and it really set the culture for when you stepped in. There wasn't this big change. It was the same style. Now, obviously, the video was fine, but you live is 10 times better. But yeah, it was such a crazy season. And then we moved out of the Saturday night place at the Realtor building, ended up in this other space. And man, it was just amazing to see God's faithfulness. And the thing I would say too is, and this is such an important part because I want to get into helping you in your church if you're a church leader, or maybe you're starting anything, or maybe you're trying to revitalize a church or you're planting a church, whatever it might be, is in that early stage and see yourself as starting right now. So at the beginning is conception, and I talked about this. But that first trimester, that first 3 months is such a critical time where, yes, God has gone before you. He's planted the seed, but you've got to get out there and you've got to hustle. Yep. Okay, you've got to get out there and do some work. I mean, every day I had a plan, and I was trying to connect with people and meet people and get into doors to where I could meet people who knew other people. Yep. You're not going to be successful and effective sitting on the couch. You're not going to be successful or effective studying. Yes, you need to study for preparation, but we're in the people business, man. Right. We're in the people business. And so if you want to be effective in ministry, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be willing to step into uncomfortable situations. Absolutely. You've got to be willing to step into making yourself feel awkward and maybe even embarrassed to meet people, to get to know people. And so I've done that year in and year out, and moving here, that was a big part of that first 3 months. And even with your core group that you initially get, say you're starting from zero, well, God's already got people that He's planted the seed in. You've got to get out there, cultivate that, but you've also got to ask those people this question. This is a really important question. It's simple but important. Who do you know that might be interested that you could connect me with, that I could talk to about our church? And you've got to be willing to have coffee with a lot of people. Yeah. You've got to be willing to help people. And it really is about helping people on the journey. And sometimes that's helping them meet Jesus for the very first time and be born again. But oftentimes it's just helping them on the journey and being an encouragement and connecting with them. We are in the people business to help them experience God and to know Him more. And so that was such a key part. And so wherever you are, whatever you're starting, you've got to make the time to get out there. If you already have people, connect with those people. Spend time with those people. Get to hear their story. Ask them, how can I, serve you? How can I help you on the journey? How do you have someone else that I can, connect with? You've got to be committed to building. It's not just going to happen because you moved and showed up.
Yeah.
It's got to be a really intense commitment. And I believe when you do that, you're honoring the call of God.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that I saw in the last season of church planning I did. I made it a point, like, I didn't just sit there and just pray for God to allow people to come into the building, which they did, but it took those actionable steps. I remember printing business cards or church cards with my name on it and the name of the church and the location, and making sure I connected with a guy by the name of Ryan. And he was kind of well known in the town. He owned a furniture company, and he walked me like door to door to every business. And he was like, "I want you to meet this guy. He's a new pastor in town, starting this church." I gave him my card, had conversation, had some coffee with some people, and it just like steadily grew the church because of connection. And
it's that person of peace.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to see like who's running the church. I mean, do people even know you exist in town, right?
Yes.
And we live in such an age that's digital now that it's not all physical. I mean, you could do Google ads, you can do, and we'll get to that later talking about our launch, but it's just like there is so many things that you can be doing as a church planner or as someone who's thinking about launching a church. There's so many resources out there and people who want to help equip you. And that's kind of our goal. We want to help equip people like you who are considering church planning, who are, revitalizing a church or taking over a church, whatever that looks like. And so I love that we get to do this, but it's crazy. Even when I moved here, it was just this crazy thing of like, all right, now, I mean, I felt like I was running before I got here. Like, like before I even officially started, it was just like, here's what God's already doing with people who have been generous and giving. Now we're going to have this temporary space, and we're going to see what's next. We're going to have a bigger space. So Eric is like, "Hey, man, I know this is crazy. We're a church plant. We're just starting and stuff, but I need you to design pretty much everything that we're going to be building." And not to get ahead of ourselves, but it was just like, we already had so much in the idea of, oh, you're church planning, you're setting up, and luckily once we got to the temporary space, we didn't have to set up. It was more of just an open floor plan. We kind of
a big concrete room.
Yeah. Well, ironically, like by code, it could only have one tiny little office space that we turned into a kids' room, and we were like, we'll see how well this works, because the kids' room, it was basically
the same room.
It was the same room, but it was two walls. There was no like ceiling or roof on top of it. So it was like, this is going to be a little obnoxious for anybody who's.
God had to be with us for us to grow in that space.
Yeah. So when my family moved here with 5 kids, we immediately were like, we're going to have to build another kids' room.
And the reason that you hire somebody like Chandon is not for him. It's for all his kids. You build a kids ministry immediately.
You do. We had to build a
and
secondary
your wife,
room.
she's amazing.
Yeah,
so.
she is. But it's just, it was crazy. It was like we're already growing so much. Just with word of mouth. I think that was like the biggest piece. People were inviting people they knew.
Yeah.
We didn't even print anything back then.
No, we never did promotion or print until we got ready to launch. And what was crazy, and you hit on this with your story about Ryan, is that person of peace. Honestly, some of the people that have invited the most people to Hope City don't even go here, but they see what we're doing and they believe in what we're doing, and it's because we were willing to go out and build a friendship with them. Like I told you earlier, to go out and put yourself out there. If you're pastoring an existing church and it's dead, you need to get out of your office and you need to get out into town and meet people and build friendships, build relationships, because you have an opportunity to impact people. And, we hadn't really talked much about our wives and our kids, but, they have been absolutely amazing in this process with connecting with people and just their support. That's such a key part of this. I can't express to you how amazing it is with my wife Crystal and with Chandon's wife Laura, their support and their engagement, and just it's incredible, God's favor. And listen, I never did really get to that second space, but we're going to do that. in our next
Yeah.
episode. And so we're going to wrap up episode 2, and we'll have episode 3 coming up soon. And so we want you to be a part of that. We're really excited about what God is doing here, and we can't wait to share more of the story with you. We're going to continue our conversation, let you hear more of the backstory of what God's done through Hope City Church, but also give you some nuts and bolts on leadership, on ministry, and just in life in general. So we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks.